I think some of the fundamental pieces that have to be there, I think there's some supporting factors and there's some landscape essential factors, some pillars that need to be there. The big one that's always talked about is committed leadership. And I think without having leadership bought into the change, most people are inherently resistant to change or change methods. And so unless there's some degree of commitment by leadership, I think you'll struggle greatly. Some of the other landscape factors that I think are crucially important is program management rigor within the organization, because any change that has to be done has to be managed. And so if you have a good program management method already instilled, it just makes everything much easier, and the culture has some degree of discipline around it. I think you have to have some measure of performance management. There has to be some degree to award people for doing that bit extra, for carrying the torch a little further, for being more involved in change or leading change. There has to be those rewards in there. You have to have knowledge management and learning. There has to be a way for you to perpetuate the change in the organization and learn from it. Some of those are kind of core, and every business has those in different degrees and different levels of competencies. I think if you have those and a few other essential pieces, then you have enough to start a change in any work. The more you jump industries, and I've worked in a few, going from aerospace defense, from aviation, transport to insurance and banking, you run into the same elements of resistance to change. I mean, I think human nature is comfortable doing what they're doing. And as soon as you take somebody's day or their job to do or the process to do and start to change that in any way, they get very uncomfortable. So the resistance to change is inherent, I think, in human nature. And I think to overcome that, some of the things we talked about previously is leadership has to be behind any change initiatives. And once people know that it's behind it, they tend to get on board a bit more. If there's an old GE equation, Q times A equals E. The quality of a solution times the acceptance rate equals the effectiveness. And so knowing that inherently the acceptance in most organizations is at best average, or worse in some cases, then the quality of the solution that you have, so basically your plan or your method has to be quite sound. So if you have a subpar method or approach or plan with strong resistance, you can almost expect a suboptimal output. So I think how you move both levers to ensure success is you make sure that your plan is well thought out. If the organization internally doesn't have the tools to build that plan, then they have to bring in some help to get it. Then you also have a very good method, and you have to have all of the factors that we talked about previously in place. And then you have to work on the acceptance of the employees, and usually it's a communication is at the heart of getting the message out. And that usually requires consistency and a lot of organizational discipline to have strands through your communication plan that permeates in the language of the organization, likes, understands, and accepts. And it has to be part of the plan as well. Often I've seen some people fall down on sporadic, disconnected communications not sewn together, almost like the organization is firing from different places. But I think it's consistent, and it's within a blanket of communications around strategic themes, hitting the right layers of the organization. That's certainly one method to do. Putting your high-performance players in charge of major strands of themes, pulling along people that way usually has tremendous benefit and helps change dramatically. Well, I think, lean typically, it's got its roots in the automotive industry and in TPS, and so I think, your transactional processes will form more closely within lean, and the Sigma approaches has been widely prevalent, kind of more in your statistical areas that are data rich. So removing variation as it touches your customer versus leaning the process out. I firmly think that most organizations who don't have an active change program, you don't necessarily have to choose. I think some very basics that you can pull from both rigors are just getting people together, starting to map your processes and build your process architecture, and that's huge. That doesn't require either one of them. It just requires some basic process mapping skills. And as you develop that and build that, then you can pull on elements of both. There's strengths and weaknesses in both approaches. They're very complementary. I think lean is a good starting point. It's easier for people to get their arms around. The lean concepts or principles are simpler. Six Sigma, as you get into the statistical-based, Minitab, heavy data usage, tends to turn a lot of people off. It takes longer to find the data, and change is often slowed down. But I wouldn't dismiss the importance of getting to that and the merits of that and what it can give you once you get it. So I think Lean is a great stepping stone, a starting point, and those tools to get your process improvement initiative and program moving, and then put in your Sigma tools where it warrants and it's appropriate. And I think if you understand both and have the strengths, understand the strengths and weaknesses of each, and can call upon those when necessary, it's hugely powerful. So I think that's the best way. Obviously, if you have a mature culture that's used to change, and in today's environment since 2007, I mean, most industries have gone through remarkable upheaval. So I think most people are no change is coming as a consequence of the business and the environment they're operating in. If you have a mature, and I guess when I say mature, people are bought into change. They're aware of it. They're aware of modern tools. They're aware of process mapping. The more mature the organization is, the easier to drive change. In organizations that have never had it or are quite immature, it takes a different approach and different tact and different techniques and different messages that have to be sent that resonate with the folks that are the coal miners that are driving the majority of the change. And I think in organizations with low maturity, you can't dive in feet first. I think you have to fix a lot of the landscape factors before you jump in with your process improvement teams. You have to look at your commitment to change, your leadership aspects, your performance management, your program management, your organizational ability to capture knowledge and to share knowledge, and your performance management. All of those have to be there to some degree. If you have very low maturity in all those landscape factors and you attempt to drive change in that, you're going to be most likely disappointed. So I think if you understand those and you're working on those at the same time you're driving very strategic elements of change, then you're in good shape. And I think where people fall down is they try to change everything immediately. And if you have an organization with low maturity, pick something that has high benefit that you believe is changeable within a period of time and focus on that. And if you grasp onto that and put all your good people behind that to make sure it succeeds, and then reference that as you go on to your next piece of change, you can build change one block at a time successfully. I think folks try to span out and they try to do everything simultaneously, and they run out of resources or they run out of organizational will to do it, and people get change overload and then they turn off a bit. So I think what's key is figure out what your resources are, figure out what you can change within the time frame you're trying to drive change, and focus on that. So go narrow and deep versus broad and thin to ensure success. And then as you get those building blocks, and continue to move on to the next thing. And it's tough to do, and it has to evolve as you go, because you could be wrong in your estimation. And as you move 1 or 2 or 3 months into a project, you learn things, and then you might have to readjust. But I think that the concept is important, and that principle. I think empirically, if you look at most of your large organizations, the ones that are more successful, that can actually claim tremendous ROI relative to Lean Sigma improvements, your GEs, your Allied Signals, they're primarily top down, so it's ingrained in the culture. To get promoted, you need to be a green belt or a black belt. You need to have done time in the quality organization. They seem to reap the tremendous benefits. They put it on their balance sheets. It's in their annual reports what they claim as benefits to Lean Sigma. It's in everything they do. Most organizations aren't there from a maturity perspective, or the culture wouldn't accept that sort of an approach. So I think the average organization is somewhere of a mid-tier implementation, where you have pockets of people doing change and it permeates through the organization. That can work. I've seen that work, but I've also seen it fail. And I think the mid-tier ones need to have good success, the right projects chosen, the right scope, the appropriate scope, and delivering the benefits that you start out to achieve. And then slowly it will cascade. So I think top-down is quicker. Your ROI becomes a much quicker approach. Your organic approaches or your mid-tier approaches can deliver, but they're going to take longer, and they'll test your resolve and your organizational will for change. So I think the whole thing boils down to leadership. And if you have the people that understand that and aren't paying it lip service, who are generally believe that change can occur via a process method and are willing to drive it, put their neck out a bit to ensure that, people will follow and the change occurs. And I think in the absence of that, where it becomes vague or not well defined, things slow down and pieces start to fall off the wagon. So I would advocate as top down as you can get. And if you do mid-tier, then make sure you choose successfully. And I'd reference the Q times A equals the quality of your solution times the acceptance rate equals your effectiveness. So have a very good plan targeted at the right benefits with the right people and the right time scales, reasonable time scales, and giving people the time off their day jobs to do extra. And that's typically one last point I'll leave you with is full-time resourcing, I think, is crucial to successful change. A lot of folks will say, well, we'll pick the good people and we'll give them a bit more and we'll give them side jobs. And the good people might be able to stretch and do that. But where you could fall down is in periods where you have high demands in the business and the projects typically take a backseat and then things slow down. So the most successful change management engagements are ones where you have dedicated full-time resources to that change. So if you put the right people on it and give them the time and bandwidth to do it, that's also a major success factor.